On today's show,
well, you have to think about this. Not everyone perceives information the same way, correct?
Yeah.
And so you still have people who actually prefer to have print books. Not everyone is into digitization, right? We all learn differently. Some people, I'm sure you know, are audio learners, kinesthetic learners. Some people need to hold that book. Some people prefer to, listen to an audiobook. So we just change and adapt with the times, as well as our big thing is making sure there's equitable access to information for everyone, to every community, regardless of limitations. Equity is our main thing, and just being able to provide access to information in whatever format, in whatever way. That's the main focus, is to make sure we can serve and provide equitable access to everyone.
Welcome to Education Today. I'm your host, Solanke. I spent 15 years in the secondary classroom teaching English, reading, and social studies. I've also been on the other side as a parent of 3 children who have completed the formal schooling years of kindergarten through 12th grade and are now in the college and career stage. Now I'm here to have conversations with teachers, administrators, school staff, students, and parents about all things education. Join me as I cover current topics in education from preschool through to college, career, and beyond. Welcome to today's show. And my guest today is a good friend of mine and former co-worker. She used to teach with me in Florida before she had the opportunity to move abroad and teach abroad. Welcome to the show, Rachel Shellman.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, no problem. It's good to have you. And today's show is all about media specialists, librarians, as we used to call them when I was in school, and how that field has changed and adapted over the years to remain relevant in our technological age. Rachel, could you tell us your background in media services?
So basically, after completing my master's degree, my master's of arts in library and information science, I started off as a public librarian in the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Libraries. I worked there for 2 years as a part-time librarian. So I have public librarian experience.
Yeah.
And I started as a school library media specialist in Hillsborough County in 2006. And I worked there from 2006 to 2012 until I decided to go overseas to work as an international teacher librarian in Kazakhstan. Then I returned 2 years later to the United States, to the same county, Hillsborough County Public Schools. And I worked 1 year in elementary, and I decided I wanted to transition into high school. And so from 2015 to 2019, I worked as a high school librarian at Wharton High School. And I left because my dream was to move abroad. And so now I'm a teacher librarian in Singapore at an international school.
That sounds amazing. So you have a lot of experience in library and information science.
Yes.
Yeah. So I remember when I was at school, we just called them librarians, and I went to school in England. The term media specialist is kind of new to me, coming to America. And I remember when I was in university that we would have these like the card catalogs, like little index cards. And we had like the stacks, where we had to go and find the books. But I remember my final year of university, the internet became a thing. And so things obviously started to change, but it was not in time for me to be able to utilize that in college, because we were still, going through the stacks and microfiche even. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course. Microfiche, microfilm.
Yeah.
I remember the card catalog. And I think it's interesting you actually call it the stacks, because that is a very that's very library terminology.
Yeah. But then the internet came, and since then we've had so many other technological advances. So definitely that job has changed a lot. I know that the school that you and I taught in, I know that before we got there, I heard that we had like 3 or 4 media specialists, and they got whittled down to eventually to 1. So that job is changing, and that job is trying to stay relevant and adapting to the technological age. But I believe it's still relevant and necessary and needed. And I believe that you probably agree with me. Well, you definitely agree with me because you're in the job. But how has that job changed, do you think, since you and I were in school? But also, how has it changed since 2006 when you started in the media specialist role?
Well, the job has changed tremendously, obviously, because to meet the needs of our changing times, right?
Hmm.
However, I think a lot of people misunderstand that the library is not just about print books
Yeah.
and a librarian
Hmm.
checking out print books. I think that's the image and the view and the perception that most people have.
Yeah.
Our job is the library is actually a service, and people don't recognize that we're service. And
Hmm.
our service is to disseminate information to people and to make information accessible to all people. And that's our main, you know,
Hmm.
focus in our services. And so it's all often overlooked. People just always think libraries, books.
Hmm.
Yes, that's a big part of it, of course. But we also, our main thing is we are a service, and we adapt with the times, right?
Yeah.
And the job has changed. So we are relevant, and we do fight to justify our positions
Hmm.
because a lot of people don't view our profession as needed. They feel like librarians aren't needed because I know you said that there used to be 3 or 4 librarians, and that's because people don't see the value in librarians. But I think that's changed. I think that's changed, especially in Hillsborough County. I know other counties in Florida did away with librarians altogether, and then they went back and had to hire them because they saw the need for librarians.
Hmm.
But basically, regardless of the format or the technological advances, we just adapt to the changing times, right?
Yeah.
And I think the big thing, people think that technology, oh, you can get everything as ebooks. Well, you have to think about this. Not everyone perceives information the same way, correct?
Yeah.
And so you still have people who actually prefer and to have print books. Not everyone is into digitization, right? We all learn differently.
Hmm.
Some people, I'm sure you know, are audio learners,
Yeah.
kinesthetic learners. Some people need to hold that book. Some people prefer to, listen to an audiobook. So we just change and adapt with the times, as well as our big thing is making sure there's equitable access to information for
Yeah.
everyone,
That's
to
it.
every community, regardless of limitations. We try to, equity is our main thing, and just being able to provide access to information in whatever format, in whatever way.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've heard of library mobiles,
Oh,
like
mobile
traveling
libraries,
libraries.
the ones that move around,
Yeah,
right?
and
Yes.
that's to the needs and to make sure that information is accessible to all people, and that's why that came about,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's the main focus, is to make sure we can serve and provide equitable access to everyone.
Yeah. Even with all our technological advances, and this generation is so apparently so tech savvy, but I've found that that's not necessarily true. And I remember when I first started teaching in the high school and then when I taught in middle school also, that we would always bring our classes to the media center at the beginning of the year and throughout the year for various lessons that either we would teach or the media specialists would teach. But I found over the years that that became less the norm as teachers were, I felt pressure to do more test prep and to be in the classroom more. And I feel like kids were missing out on learning skills because, like I said, yes, they're very tech savvy and they're on their phones and know how to do TikTok. But so many kids didn't even know how to open a Word document and start typing, right?
You're right. You're right about that. And a lot of that responsibility, as far as you know, integrating lessons into the library, library lessons, the curriculum, a lot of that has to do with the school librarian,
Yeah.
um, and how they promote their program.
Uh-huh.
Do they market to the teachers? Do they collaborate with teachers? All of that falls on the librarian, the media specialist,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so it's our jobs to advocate,
Yeah.
and to collaborate. That's a big part of our job. And so there are just essential library skills that students still need, whether it's digital or whether we're learning how to use the digital tools, there's always a need, for
Mm-hmm.
those library skills to be integrated into the curriculum. For example, I'm sure the main thing is like research, a
Yes.
big component of, teaching students how to research effectively,
Mm-hmm.
teaching them how to access resources, credible, like website
Yeah.
citations, because these are requirements that they're expected to do in their classrooms, and that very much is a part of library skills.
Yeah.
So it's really up to the school librarian to really promote that and to really collaborate and develop that rapport
Mm-hmm.
with classroom teachers
Yeah.
to keep that going. You have to. It's a major
Yeah.
component of what we do.
Yeah. And you mentioned the research, and that is a huge deal because, like as you said, kids do not know how to do it beyond going to Google or Wikipedia. So they need to be taught. And I just, to me, it's like, what better place for them to learn that than in the school library?
They
Shellman.
definitely need those skills, because a lot of times for those students who decide to go on further to higher education,
Mm-hmm.
they need to learn ethical ways of using information. You can't just go and Google something and copy and paste it into your paper. And I know that's like the easiest thing to do, but now they've gotten so strict. And so it really is so like essential that our students are informed so that they don't get in trouble for academic dishonesty.
Right.
I mean, which can result in failing and legal trouble, right?
Yeah.
And it's serious. It's a
Mm-hmm.
serious offense, actually, that people don't realize. I mean, now they even have software. I'm sure you've heard of it. Turnitin, where the
Oh, yeah.
teachers can run student papers through Turnitin to see what portion
Yeah.
has been copied and pasted from the internet. And so this is where a librarian really comes into play, because we do teach the skill of like paraphrasing,
Mm-hmm.
how to cite sources and give credit to your sources. All of this is ethical,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
Yeah. So besides lack of research skills or knowledge of how to do citations or to work in, like, for instance, MLA format, what other basic skills do you see lacking in our K-12 students?
Just like a general love for reading.
Yes.
Um, just a general love for reading,
Yeah.
besides like research skills that I feel like, they're lacking. There's just a general love for reading. And there's
Yeah.
some type of literature out there for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has something that they would enjoy reading.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just think that the enjoyment of reading has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that people don't recognize the librarian as kind of like the hub of the school. It's really a safe place as
Yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Not all students want to go outside, like I'm just thinking of like during recess. I mean,
Yeah.
like in elementary school or like in high school, not all kids want to be outside. So a lot of times the library is an outlet for those students.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking about the school that you and I taught in together, and what a disservice it is to the kids when the library is closed down for testing for weeks at a time.
Oh yeah, that's a major problem in
Yeah.
Florida, specifically Hillsborough County, is
Mm-hmm.
using the library as a testing center.
Yeah.
It really has an overall effect on the students' learning. It has effect on what the librarian is able to do.
Yeah.
Really devaluing the job of the school librarian. It's a major problem.
Yeah. There needs to be that needs to be done somewhere else. The library should be open at all times to everyone.
And it also, I think it depends on the administration, because if the administration values the library program, they do try to find other ways to
Yeah.
keep from closing the library. But if not, then the library, unfortunately, is closed. But I think the problem is, I think the librarian is often used in Hillsborough County to administer and
Yes.
proctor tests,
Testing.
right? That's a
Right.
problem.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a problem if the librarian would be allowed to travel to those
Mm-hmm.
classrooms to continue to teach lessons.
Yeah.
But
That
unfortunately, that's not the reality.
Yeah. And that would make more sense. Yeah.
Yes.
So going forward, now we have this new debacle. I shouldn't really call it that because perhaps it has positives also. Artificial
Okay.
intelligence being used by students to write essays, to do assignments and homework. Um, so basically, robots, computers doing what we used to do ourselves. How do you see this affecting the job of a media specialist going forward? How do you think your job is going to change in general? Because technology keeps on changing.
Well, what they will do is they will develop a program where those types of instances or can be detected, right?
Yeah.
We will always be uh, ahead of the game, kept abreast in some form or fashion. But there are ways that can be detected.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect our job. It's just a matter of us really, 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 like librarians, really, really, really teaching about like ethical
Mhm.
behaviors and that type of stuff, and like academic dishonesty. It's
Yeah.
a huge thing.
Yeah. And teaching, like we said before, teaching kids the correct way to do research and, rather than taking
Yes.
shortcuts. Do you see yourself staying in this field long term for the long haul?
Oh yeah. I do see myself staying in long term. As a matter of fact, I am in the process of going through my application. Just completed an interview yesterday to start my PhD program because
Yay.
I am a really a major advocate for the field of librarianship.
Hmm.
And so there are some original things that I would like to implement in the future
Yeah.
as an expert, as a scholar
Yeah.
in library and information science. And my biggest concern is DEIJ, and inclusion, diversity and inclusion,
Hmm.
and equitable and practices within librarianship. It's not a topic that's discussed. And so I kind of would like to further investigate, do some original research, become a scholar and a major proponent of like implementing DEIJ practices in the field of
What
librarianship,
is that?
whether it's
DEIJ.
for stands for diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice is
Okay.
what it stands for.
Hmm.
And there's a big push everywhere in all organizations, in schools, in every sector,
Hmm.
because um, there are marginalized communities,
Yeah.
and there are actually professors who have done research on it, like, and are starting to uncover those truths of like the experiences of marginalized communities. And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is like people of color
Hmm.
or the minority
Hmm.
in the field, as well as the patrons. Um, so that's starting to really be investigated. And that's something that I would like to, conduct some original research and share my findings and eventually implement best practices that incorporate DEIJ.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Sounds like
I know
some
that was a long answer.
sounds like some exciting research. I love research. I'm sorry. I'm such a nerd.
Maybe you should become a librarian.
maybe maybe I should.
Really,
I'll think
if
about
you like research, you
it.
should consider it.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, that's not the first time you've told me that as well. Yeah. Well, what I should ask you really is, what led you to this field?
That's a very interesting question. What led me to the field was I remember in college or university, I always visited the library
Uh-huh.
because it was part of our assignments. And being a history major, we did a lot of research. We
Yeah.
had to basically live in the library
Hmm.
and just learning how to use the library. I was impressed. And I think one day I made a comment to the librarian and I was like, do you guys know everything? And I think that's the common statement that people make. And she
Yeah.
was like, no. And she explained it to me. And I was like, you have to have a master's degree to be a librarian. And I just kind of giggled, like, what a
Hmm.
joke.
Yeah.
And so once I graduated from college, I was working as a library assistant
Oh.
and I got to have more experience. in a library.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, my supervisor, she encouraged me to take it further and, start attaining my library degree. And so I did. At the time, Georgia didn't have any accredited programs. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was able to go to Florida as an in-state student. And that's how I ended up in Tampa,
Oh, wow.
attending the University of South Florida, because at the time,
Oh,
Georgia did not have an accredited program.
yeah.
So that's what led to Florida.
Wow.
But yeah, librarianship is, you can do so much in the field. And I don't think people realize that you can be a research librarian. You can work for Google as a researcher.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just limited to libraries. And I think a lot of people don't understand that you can work at a presidential library. You can be an archivist. You can become a professor. Of course, you need the PhD for that.
Yeah.
There's so much you can do in librarianship. I had a friend, she was a librarian at PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
So it's not just limited to schools and traditional libraries that people think of. There's research librarians, there's academic librarians, law librarians, medical librarians, all kinds of librarians.
Yeah. That's good information. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences in library and information sciences. Actually, that's your degree, isn't it?
It is a degree.
Yeah.
Now it's popularly called information science. They've taken the library from out of it and at most schools. So now it's information science. But
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time today to share with us your experiences as a school librarian and media specialist. And I wish you the best of luck as you go about getting your PhD. And I hope you continue to enjoy your tenure in Singapore. It sounds really exciting.
Thank you, Mrs. Solanke, for having me. And you have a great morning.
You too.
And I look forward to speaking to you again.
And you have a great night in Singapore because we're 12 hours ahead. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Education Today. We'll be back next time with more current topics on all things education. In the meantime, you can email any questions or comments you have about the show to edtodaypodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, please hit the subscribe button on whichever platform you are listening so we can continue to expand our reach. We are listener supported, so if you're able to make a small monthly donation, you can do so by clicking the Support This Podcast link at the bottom of the show notes. Check out my blog for more about my experiences as a classroom teacher at medium.com/@SOCO. That's medium.com/@SOHKOR. You can also find me on Instagram at SOCO_writes. That's SOHKOR_writes. See you next time, and thank you again for listening.